And today we're going to be talking about the 5 goals you should aim to achieve before the age of 40. The first one is to have 3 times your gross annual income saved or invested.
With inflation, that number should be increasing, quite substantially. So there's quite a bit of investing that needs to happen to get there, but also you can benefit from 10 years of compounding.
The second goal to try and achieve before the age of 40 is to have an estate plan and life insurance set up.
So that's the serious stuff.
Yeah.
One of the good things about life insurance is that it doesn't go into your estate, so beneficiaries get it kind of immediately.
The third goal is to have had the conversation with your parents who unfortunately are not getting any younger.
If they are in a bad way because they didn't plan that well for retirement, then you are most likely have to support them.
Then the fourth financial goal is to have a diversified investment portfolio. The last goal is to have a tertiary education fund set up for your children.
I would suggest you create your own.
Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Frankly Speaking. My name is Cassidy Nudal. I am head of growth at Franc.
Hi everyone, I'm Seb Patel, COO and co-founder at Franc.
And today we're going to be talking about the 5 goals you should aim to achieve before the age of 40. If you haven't watched our 5 goals to aim to achieve before the age of 30, make sure you watch that here, because we obviously hope that you have already ticked those off before you get into the next range of goals, which are the ones we're going to be talking about today. So out of interest, how many of those did you tick off by the age of 30?
Yeah, I think luckily I managed to tick all of them off. Yeah, I would say I didn't have a separate emergency fund, but I did have like money in my bond that I could access, which is sometimes a better idea.
Cool. I only had 3 out of 5, unfortunately. So I need to make sure that I've got more of those ticked off before we go into our next list, which is, as I'm aging towards 40, I need to make sure that I'm focusing on ticking off all these goals. So before we go into those, I think it's worth noting that kind of going into your 30s, you obviously are starting to get an understanding of the kind of lifestyle that you want to live. And that's really important because as you're aging towards 40, you need to start really thinking about beyond 40, right? So you're edging further and further towards retirement age, even though it probably doesn't feel like it. You want to make sure that you are preparing yourself for that time and the kind of lifestyle you want to live when you become a work-free retiree. Because of course, and maybe you can speak to this a little bit more, Seb, your 30s, you don't have as much flexibility and time, obviously, as your 20s, right?
Yeah, and also, you're talking about 40. By the time you're 40, you're almost halfway there, right, to retirement. If you started working at, let's say, 21 and you're retiring at 65, you're almost halfway there. I think now people are working a bit longer just because people are living longer, so they need to sustain themselves for a longer period. Retiring at 60 is not so viable anymore because you'll run out of money quite quickly. But yeah, I think like the way you set it up, you need to kind of decide what kind of life you want to live, not only in retirement, but in the build up to retirement, right? Do you want to be like super frugal up until you're 60 and then just, live your best life? Mm-hmm. Or is it a balance of like enjoying yourself, but then also being responsible so that when you do actually retire, you're not living off your kids or looking for handouts, or like, yeah, totally battling, that you can actually survive and live a good life.
Cool. So you've preempted quite a few of our goals here. The first goal to try and achieve before the age of 40 is to have 3 times your gross annual income saved or invested. So obviously by 30, it was 1. By 40, it's 3. It's quite a big jump, especially if you're earning a little bit more in your mid 30s, 40s. Maybe speak a bit to that.
Yeah. So like you say, so let's say that I use the same example. Let's say you're earning 300,000 Rand a year when you're 30. You're not saying, okay, you're 40, it's going to be, it's going to be 3 times 300 because you would have hoped that you had a better job. With inflation, that number should be increasing, quite substantially. So, I'll use a random number. So let's say the same person that was earning 300,000 Rand a year when they were 30 now is earning, let's say, 800,000 a year when they're 40. They only needed to have the 300,000 when they were 30, but now it's 3 times 800. It's 2.4 million in 10 years time. So, there's quite a bit of investing that needs to happen to get there, but also you can benefit from 10 years of compounding, which is always great because remember, we're assuming that you're not dipping into that first 300,000 Rand. So that has got 10 years of compounding. And then every month, if you contribute a certain amount, that can also, get you there.
Then the second goal to try and achieve before the age of 40 is to have an estate plan and life insurance set up. So probably the least fun out of all of these goals, quite a lot of admin, but important admin, right? And especially if you have dependents, whether that's your kids or a partner or your parents, just making sure that they are cared for by the time that they're cared for in the case of something happening to you.
Yeah, so that's the serious stuff. So that, take into account like having a will that's up to date with a power of attorney that's also, up to date and durable. Also make sure that if you do die, what your estate looks like in terms of taxes. Life insurance is also a big thing. One of the good things about life insurance is that it doesn't go into your estate, so beneficiaries get it kind of immediately, because estates can be long and drawn out processes. You can't have your dependents, waiting years for money like school fees and that kind of stuff. At least life insurance you can get quite quickly. But yeah, that's all the serious stuff that you need to have sorted. By the time you're 40.
So not fun, but important and serious. Then the third goal to try and achieve before the age of 40 is to have had the conversation with your parents who unfortunately are not getting any younger. Why is that so important?
So if your parents, it depends, how they live their life. If they were super frugal and are now living their best life, then great. It means you don't have to really support them. Maybe you can, get some benefit out of it. But yeah, if it's the opposite and they are in a bad way because they didn't plan that well for retirement, then you are most likely have to support them, which means that you're looking after not only yourself and your own family, like your kids and your partner, but also potentially your parents, which can be quite a drain and something that maybe you haven't planned for. So the important thing is to kind of, have that conversation early, know what their financial situation is, and if you're willing to help, plan for it and know that you're in for something.
Then the fourth financial goal to aim towards by the age of 40 is to have a diversified investment portfolio. Obviously, as you're kind of aging towards retirement, you want to make sure that you are mitigating your risk as far as possible. So what does a diversified investment portfolio look like in your 30s going towards 40?
Yeah, I mean, if you're 40, you're still quite young, so you still got a lot of time. So it should be still heavily exposed to the stock market. Some property. I think a lot of people will have bought their primary residence. So for me, a diversified portfolio would be, a lot of exposure to equities, some cash. Cash and bonds, which you'll get through, unit trusts and ETFs, some property exposure. And if you look at like what types of instruments, like how you should be accessing those, I think you should have what's called discretionary, which means like that's what's available on Franc, where it's not like in a retirement wrapper or it's not in a tax-free wrapper. It's just you've chosen to invest and the restrictions are less. So if you want to contribute more, you can. If you want to withdraw, you can. There's no restrictions there. So, like have part of your portfolio be in discretionary investments. But I think also importantly, you need to have like a big portion in like a retirement fund, whether that's pension provident fund through your employer or an RA. And then also to top it off, I think a tax-free investment account that is also heavily exposed to equities would be good.
Awesome. And we have a whole Academy lesson video about planning for your retirement where we cover all of these funds, which you can access over there. So have a look if you haven't seen it already. And then the last goal to achieve before the age of 40 is to have a tertiary education fund set up for your children, obviously if you have kids. Darts from Old Mutual estimated that the cost of sending a child to university for a year costs around 55,900 in 2023. And by 2030, that's going to rise to 95,700, which means that if you send your child through a 4-year degree, you're going to spend around R1 million on their tertiary education, which is obviously a lot of money, and you want to have prepared for that. Seb, any tips or pointers around kind of where you save or invest that money, and at what stage?
Yeah, so I mean, some life insurance companies offer, education policies. I mean, for me, they're often very expensive and not really worth it. So I would suggest you create your own, discretionary fund. So effectively, not tax free, not retirement, where you put money away for your child's education. And again, it depends on how early you start. If you start when they are very young, then you can be heavily exposed to equities because that gives you the best chance of growth. If they're slightly older, maybe you want to be a bit more conservative so that the money that you put away is protected from a capital point of view. I mean, some people may disagree with me and rather put the money into tax-free investment accounts, especially if the kids are very young. Mm-hmm. But for me, if it was up to me, I would rather, if I'm investing into a tax-free account for my kids, rather use that to build their wealth as opposed to fund the education. But yeah, it's up to the individual.
I have a lot of work to do before I reach the age of 40 to reach all these goals. Seb, if you don't mind me saying, I know you've just crossed that mark. How many of those did you take off before your 40th birthday?
Most of them, I would say I don't have too many of the serious things sorted out. So estate planning and wills and all that kind of stuff. I also don't have dependents, so it makes it less of a priority.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I think all the other stuff I've kind of ticked off.
Okay, so we all have some work to do. I would love to know how many of those you've ticked off already if you're in your 30s or just past 40. So please comment below and let us know. And until next time, cheers.
Cheers, guys.